Hey everybody, welcome back to EDBEAT. I'm April Cummings of Cayman Life TV, and of course this is Patrick Brendel of CaymanCurrent.org.
Hi, April. How are you?
I'm doing very well considering I tried to garden and it didn't work out so well for the plants or the weeds. So yeah, this is recovery time and the solace of this week's EDBEAT. See, nicely transitioning. Didn't I do that well?
Always.
Yes, yes,
And
you
we have
did.
so much to
Oh,
talk about.
we have so much to talk about. Okay, so every week, Patrick and I discuss all things education. Okay, it's almost every week. It's mostly weekly when we can. And as Patrick said, we have a lot to talk about this week. We like to fire up the webcam and start talking, but this week we have some guests, if you will, be it virtually. And I was trying to remember the name of the movie with Eddie Murphy that was called The Nutty Professor. I thought that really wasn't appropriate. So we'll just say Professor Chemistry. How about that?
That's right. I sat down and had a chat with a local educator by the name of Orlando Broomfield, and he has been teaching at Cayman Academy since the beginning of the school year. And he has started an online learning resource for chemistry for secondary school students, aptly titled CaribbeanChemist.com. And I talked with him earlier this week, and for EdBeat. So I'll let Mr. Broomfield and Mr. Brendel take it from here. I'm here with Orlando Broomfield, who is an educator, a teacher at Cayman Academy. He joined the school in the beginning of the school term in August 2021. And Mr. Broomfield has 12 years of experience teaching in 4 different Caribbean countries, the latest being Cayman. And we're here to talk about chemistry, and more specifically, his venture called Caribbean Chemists, which is an online learning resource for studying the subject of chemistry. So, thanks for joining us. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, I guess can you tell us a little bit about your background, and then what led you to develop this online resource?
Right. So this online resource was created with the goal in mind to kind of replicate most of my experience in the classroom teaching chemistry. Rightly said, I have lots of years teaching chemistry, learning a few tricks from other brilliant chemistry teachers, and also learning a few tricks from my students as well. um, Taught in various places under different circumstances, multicultural, girls only, you name it. What I've learned over the years have helped me to have some significant successes in the classroom, 2 of which include the highest chemistry score, well, the 3rd highest chemistry score in 2019 in the CSEC examination in Belize. And associated with that was top place for integrated science, which includes chemistry, physics, and biology as well, right? So based on that, I mean, I have something to offer, and so I want to offer that to students across the board to broaden my reach, and also to cash in, to be a little bit of an entrepreneur in the process. So my passion for chemistry is what drives me, and the ability for chemistry education to sharpen students' thinking skills, to give them more confidence in the classroom, and they learn transferable skills that they can use in other subject areas as well.
Yeah. So just
Right.
so
So
my understanding is, in 2019 you were teaching in Belize, and
right.
so for that year, your group of students scored the 3rd highest chemistry scores in the Caribbean region
Yes.
on the CSECs, and then the highest score on integrated science
Yes.
in the region for CSECs. Just so everybody's clear on that.
Right. Thank you. Yes. So the Caribbean Chemists, which is my online practice website, is more than a practice website. Yes, it has practice tests for students, but it also has learning resources. And one of the challenges of chemistry education at the high school level for students is the ability to connect the different concepts together. Because chemistry is a subject that includes a lot of interrelated ideas. and it's difficult to progress in one area if you are weak in other areas. So what I try to do is to present resources that help students with that um, skill to be able to make interconnections to see how concepts are related across the board. I also have other resources that I will continuously upload to the system. So that will include teaching videos and other resources as well. But as it stands, students can log on, pay for their subscription, their annual subscription, practice chemistry questions depending on which topic that they want. They could choose those, and each question comes with direct, instant feedback to let the students know where their weak areas are and what they need to do to strengthen those. And if they get the questions correct, they get a bunch of supporting details to help them to be more assertive, more confident if they should see a similar question in the future.
And so, just going off the name of it, so the Caribbean Chemist. So this is aimed at students in the Caribbean. Is it geared toward the CSEC and CXC examinations specifically in that curriculum?
No, it's not. Any student of high school chemistry in the world can use the resources. It's not linked to CXC. It's not linked to any exam. It's just linked to chemistry education overall.
And so, what year groups would this be appropriate for?
So specifically to juniors and seniors, so in the second to last and last years of high school, those students would find these resources most appealing because the questions are really aimed at helping them to develop higher order taxonomy skills. So the ones who are just learning about chemistry, starting high school, they're going to struggle a little bit to find comfort with the resources. So it's really catered to those who are in preparation mode to take some kind of internal or external summative examinations in chemistry.
And so this is a relatively new resource. I believe it became available just in February 2022.
Right.
And as you said, you're going to continue to add content and enhance the site. And I'm going to pull this up on the screen when we show this, and but so people know, it's www.caribbeanchemists.com. So I think it's worthwhile to check it out, especially if you have a student or are a student who is in that last 2 years of high school doing chemistry. So just as your experience as an educator, do you think it's ever too late for a student to take on a complex subject like chemistry?
It could be if that student shies away from self-directed learning skills. So it does take a little bit of effort for a student to develop positive, intrinsic motivational habits. Tell yourself, I can do it, I got this, those kind of things. But also to develop self-directed learning skills, including creating their own notes and checking in with their teachers periodically, building good study habits, building relationships with other students out there, networking with other students out there. So if a student does not like those things, they're not going to find it easy to adjust. Mm-hmm. But if a student has some or just basic self-directed learning skills and they are driven to be successful, they can do well in chemistry.
And so chemistry, as I recall, has a lot of memorization to it in terms of memorizing formulas, the periodic table, which is a big bugbear. What are some strategies that students can use to have that recall available in a subject like chemistry?
Right. So I'm going to go from the beginning. So in approaching a lesson, a student wants to take a look at the topic in a textbook of some sort or some kind of resource. That student may not be able to understand the concept fully at that point, but at least they are familiarizing themselves with what they don't know. So they are kind of zooming in on specific areas. Once they are in the instruction, then they need to raise those concerns in a productive way with other learning partners and also with the teacher. So in that way, they are taking ownership of their learning. And then making notes afterwards to kind of zoom in and writing off what they know, what they don't know, and keeping basically a progress report on themselves. Um, Outside of that, pick up patterns, right? So the atomic number of an element, for example, calcium would always be 20. And from that number, there are so many spin-offs that they can benefit from if they know how to make the interconnections. So from that atomic number, they can get what kind of chemical reactions calcium would participate in, what to do in terms of analyzing mathematical relationships as it relates to calcium, where it falls in the periodic table, and its potential physical and other chemical properties. So just by knowing that the atomic number of calcium is 20, they can make many connections. And so one of the things that I encourage my students to do, and I help them to do, is to have doodle notes, right? So doodle notes, the kind of thing where you make one little um, box on a page with some information in it, and then you try to connect as many information as you know in other boxes surrounding that one box. And it doesn't have to be a box, right? I'm just saying box, but it's a way of graphically organizing your notes in a fun way according to how you learn. And then nothing is wrong with running off some of these study times with a partner. So you practice with a partner. What's the mass number of this element? Where can I find it in the periodic table? What kind of ion does it form when it tries to become stable? And it goes on like that. So having a good study partner is a way to go for doing excellent in chemistry.
And so, students in high school, they can be taking half a dozen or more subjects at once. What's your advice on students trying to manage the study and their learning workloads?
Right. So a student who has a packed workload, well, I would just advise them to have a regular structured study time. And that would minimize the frustration and the amount of work that they have to do leading up to an assessment. So a student who has a regular study time, for example, if they're going to take up chemistry, which sometimes and most times have some math related to that, they can pick up chemistry and mathematics and probably physics as well, and group that in one study block and make that twice per week. So every Tuesday and Thursday, 5 to 7, I'll take on chemistry, physics, and mathematics. And then I will keep study notes, I will keep doodle notes, I will keep other learning resources, I will go over my tests, my quizzes, I will keep positive interactions with my study partners, my teachers. I will practice questions. What I don't know, I'll be honest with myself and relate it to someone from whom I can get some kind of learning support.
And so kind of generally, and we can start wrapping up on this, but in terms of, the elephant in the room, of course, is the COVID-19 pandemic and its effect on education and technology and online learning. I mean, can you talk a little bit about what you've seen as far as maybe strategies to adapt going forward and how that might, if it relates to Caribbean chemists?
Right. So one of the things that I had to do to adjust to the pandemic, teaching during the pandemic, is to adapt different pedagogical strategies. And one that I implemented was the flipped learning model, where the students get the learning resources before they meet me in a scheduled class time. And when they meet me, it's for engaging with me with the content, aiming, of course, at developing higher order thinking skills. So when I flipped the classroom, it helped me a lot. So my students would get all my content, all my learning resource, and some practice questions as well. And what I normally do, yes, I'm a super teacher sometimes, is to grade those questions before the scheduled class time. So they have some kind of feedback, and that helps them a lot. So regular, consistent, strong feedback, not just good job, because good job doesn't do anything for a student, but feedback that encourages the student to consider learning goals, learning targets, and the effectiveness of their study methods to help them reach those learning targets, and what to do if they're successful, or the intervention strategies that they need to apply if they're not successful. So when that whole system of having a strong pedagogical background from the teacher is in place, and the teacher gives strong feedback, regular feedback that's consistent with helping the students to grow academically, then that worked for me during the pandemic.
Yeah, and do you have any final thoughts or anything you'd like to be sure to mention or to emphasize that maybe you already said?
Right. So once again, Caribbean Chemists, it's a website that allows students to choose their topics broken down in 15 modules. It contains a wide range of topics that would be covered in various localities. And each question comes with detailed feedback, letting the students know their areas of strengths and what to do if they have those weaknesses, related weaknesses. And it gives them a progress report at the end of each assessment. So they have 10 minutes to complete 10 questions. That comes with detailed feedback per question and per session doing the quiz. It also has learning resources, which I'll continue to update over the next 6 to 8 weeks, months rather. And once again, I encourage all those students out there who are doing chemistry to um, remember to be committed to success, to high levels of success, and those teachers who are out there that teaching chemistry can be frustrating at times, but we look forward to those high performance outcomes of taking a student from a place of fear and lack of commitment and lack of direction to a sense of confidence, a sense of purpose, and a sense of commitment to high success. So those are the things that we have to look for as educators. And one more thing, I always tell students who are interested in business and law and the other areas to try chemistry, because it will build skills that you can transfer to your other areas of interest.
Great. Well, I want to thank you very much for appearing on the show. And, once again, everybody, I think it's worthwhile to check out CaribbeanChemist.com and see if maybe this is a learning resource that works for you or your student. So thank you very much. Thanks for talking, and hope you have a great day.
Thank you. Same to you.
That was so interesting.
Yes. No, I think as I said, I think it's a really great resource for students and, parents who, chemistry doesn't come naturally, even though it's a natural science, it doesn't come as naturally to some as to others. So all the different kind of help you can get comes in handy. So, I again, like I said, urge people to check it out and see the content and see if this is something that might help push people over the edge, especially since now we're nearing the end of year, end of term exams coming up.
Absolutely. And as you said, some parents are more challenged than others when it comes to helping their children with these things. But, those parents shall remain nameless at this time, confidentially speaking. All right. So also on our agenda this week, and we did, I think, mention this a bit previously, but UCCI got a very substantial, is that redundant? Substantial grant from Resimbid, I would say. And so talk a little bit about the clip we're about to play.
Well, so UCCI got a grant from the European Union's Resimbid program, and I got to talk to UCCI's project officer for the program, a man by the name of Cleveland Julian, who taught me more about the program and what they're looking for, starting with how to properly pronounce Resimbid. And so here's a clip where Mr. Sums up what the program's about and kind of what UCCI is looking for.
First of all, my name is Cleveland Julian. I serve as the project officer for the program. So essentially, it's the Resimbid program was funded by the European Union in conjunction with the French expertise development development implementers. And essentially what the goal here is to recruit 50 Caymanians across 4 sectors: tourism, construction, solar energy, and information computer technology. Resimbid recognized the need not just throughout other parts of the world that they work, but specifically with overseas territories to really provide support around resilience and sustainability, particularly after the impacts of COVID-19. So their goal is really to support overseas territories in building capacities for what is the future needs in those 4 critical areas.
So I don't know if you know this, Patrick, but when we first established the premier of the Cayman Islands, it took me a good 3 years to stop saying premiere as in movie premiere. So, you know, Resimbid. It's going to take me a minute to get that one under the tongue comfortably.
Yeah, so I think the highlights are they're looking for Caymanians from the ages of 18 to 45 who are unemployed or underemployed to get this year-long training program, which culminates in a job placement internship type program in one of those 4 areas that Mr. Julian talked about. And something he emphasized to me off camera was they're really looking for a range of applicants' experiences. So they want the 18-year-olds, they want the 20-year-olds who are just getting into their professional careers, but they also equally want people who are 35, 40 years old who may, for example, may have been in these fields before, but are looking for more training and more experience in order to upskill themselves. So his message was like, really, if anybody's potentially interested in one of these 4 areas, and you tick all the other boxes, put an application in so we can get the conversation going.
And it does make sense to have people who are trying to refresh or perhaps move in a slightly different direction than their experience base. But it would be a great combination having that diverse group of folks in the same programs. It just makes it more interesting all around. All right,
and then another point he gave was, so of course they're looking for applicants, and they're also looking for companies who may want to help with the job placements, but they're also looking for kind of a 3rd category of volunteers, and that's mentors. So if you, for example, are in solar energy or sustainable construction, and you maybe have some time in energy and willingness, if you contact them, ideally he'd like each of the 50 students to be paired one-on-one with a mentor who can really help them as they go on their professional journey. So if you think your background fits the requirements of a mentor, and really having your heart in the right place is probably the majority of that requirement, then also reach out to the Resimbid program.
Perfect. Okay, so kind of want to shift direction a tiny bit and talk about some of the reporting in Cayman Current. I always say this week, but it could really be last week or next week. It's any week is a good week. But you've been doing some work around the data or the report released by the Ministry and Department of Education. Ministry and Department of Education. Talk a little bit about some of the highlights of the reporting that you guys have been doing.
So you're correct on the timing, because it has been for the past several weeks now, and I believe we've written a total of, and I'm looking at my other monitor, 8 stories on the education data report. And we've covered topics including how students with special education needs or disabilities performed on end of year exams, and which might not come as a surprise is those students overall experience more difficulty with those tests than students who didn't have diagnosed extra needs. We've also talked about varied performance among public primary schools. So there's two basic tests that they give the student bodies in year 6. And at the beginning of the year, they do what's called a CAT-4 assessment, which we may have talked about. And that's kind of measuring a student's cognitive abilities to reason. So that kind of sets an expectation. So generally, if a group of kids does about this well on this predictive test, then by the end of the year, you can expect them to do about this well on the end of year exams. So what you find by looking at each of the public primary schools is the students come in at the beginning of the year with variance in their reasoning abilities, and then at the end of the year, there's even greater variance in how the students actually performed, and that doesn't always match up with the predictive tests at the beginning of the year. So some of the schools came in with kind of, oh, well, maybe only 10%, 20% of the kids are going to pass English. Then at the end of the year, whoa, 60 or 70%, and vice versa. And then also, just going off more generally speaking on these beginning of the year reasoning tests, as people I always need timeline, memory jogs on the timeline of when things actually happened.
Yeah.
So for this data report, this would have been the beginning of the 2020 school year, so fall 2020, which is when schools reopened after the COVID closure in spring 2020. So schools closed spring 2020. Kids were at home for a long time. There was lockdown, blah, blah, blah. Then they reopened fall 2020. Kids take these reasoning tests. Significant drop in the scores on the reasoning tests compared to the previous year's cohort who would have taken it before COVID lockdown. And, so one of the things we talked to Department of Education Services Director Mark Ray about was they're still trying to measure and get a handle on the level of the learning gaps caused by COVID in Cayman. And for me, I don't know, but it looks like this could be one indicator of the effect of the acute effect of the school closure in the spring.
And technically, it wasn't closed for quote unquote that long.
Yes.
But when you look at the pace of, things are done in blocks, when you're learning, right? So if the block here isn't in place, it's gonna just slow everything down anyway, let alone the other stresses that were going on at the time. So even though compared to a number of other places, our kids were in the classroom relatively quickly, it nonetheless still had an impact if from what we're seeing anyway, right?
And
there are other
remember,
factors too,
not
right?
only were the schools physically closed, but kids, unlike other places, we were stuck in our houses all the time with kids.
Months,
so how does that affect the student being able to start the next school year on the right foot? I don't know.
And that's true. We don't know. A lot of it is sort of speculating and guesstimating based on the information at hand, but the data does kind of help us, give us some sort of parameters to think around, for lack of a better word.
And one last thing from the this kind of tranche of reports that I've cranked out is this year's data report is a little bit unique. Well, not unique, but it's different from last year because in regard to the CSEC results, so these are the end of year Caribbean Examination Council tests for kids leaving year 11 and then year 12 that they take in the public schools here. Those tests are generally taken in spring, and then in Cayman the results typically come out in the fall. And so they'll the way it usually goes is they'll give you the overall test for Cayman in the region in the fall, in advance of then the education data report coming out later. Well, this time there was delays and COVID-related delays in the release of the scores, particularly in terms of because the students get their scores individually, and then there's an appeals process. Oh, hey, you said I was absent, but I actually took that test, or I couldn't this score looks really low for what I was predicted to do. So though there's and this is usual process, and they'll go back and look at these numbers and verify things and change things that need to be changed. And then they'll release kind of the final data set that the countries will then release and say, okay, this is how the Cayman Islands population did as a whole. So usually that comes out in the fall. This year, because of the delays, the first time we get a look at these test results is in the data report. So it's a front page story now that you can see. So I wrote a post with some key observations from those 2021 exam scores, and it's got and if you don't like a lot of words, it's got a lot of charts. I think I built 8 graphics just for this one story. I think the top line observation from this data set is in the graph that's kind of obscured on this test view. It shows how Cayman did in math and English compared to the Caribbean average. And so you can see the vertical axis is English. So if you're near the top, it means you did better than the Caribbean average in English. If you're near the bottom, you did worse. Maths is the x-axis, the horizontal axis. So if you're going to the right, that's good. You did better than the average. If you're on the left, not so good. You did worse than the average. I put Cayman in red so people can see it. And you can see we scored lower than the Caribbean average in English and better than the Caribbean average in maths. And
which I had this assumption it would be the other way around. And I don't know what that's based on. It's just I have this perception that math would be more challenging.
And you're right. In general, and so you see Jamaica's there in green. So they did about average in English and a little worse in maths. That's not the result. That's not, Jamaica generally does a little bit better than Cayman on these tests. It's mixed this year, but you're right. So overall, Cayman students tend to do not as well on the math portion as they do on the English portion, and that trend is a regional trend. So overall, kids tend to do better on the English test than the math test. It's just that compared to the regional average, we did less worse on the math than the other kids did. And that is a bit unusual. And one of the charts that's on there, this is the third time in 10 years that Cayman has beat the regional average in math. So most of the time we do worse than the regional average.
And sometimes that may be due to the composition of that cohort, their particular aptitude, or perhaps additional emphasis placed in one area over another. And what's interesting is that sometimes when you do put a lot of emphasis on a different direction than you were previously, you can actually see that in the scores. It doesn't always pan out that way, but it is interesting that when you really beef up the math, sometimes you got to be careful to still maintain the same standard on the other side.
Yeah, and Cayman's so small that you could have 1 or 2 teachers come in and really maybe do a different approach to teaching math, or they just really have a great year on this, and then some classes by themselves will be enough to move the average by a couple points. As I think we've talked about before, I've reported is Clifton Hunter's scores were particularly an improvement over past years, particularly in math. And we're still cranking out. We're kind of nearing the end of seeing the light on the tunnel at the end of the series on the data report. And I believe the next story I'm going to do, it might be the last one, but I'm going to put, and we have a table here, I'm going to put in a searchable, sortable table students' results on every single one of the dozens of end of year tests that they took. So you'll be able to see how everybody did, not just in English and math and science, but integrated sciences and automotive technology and all the different array, which I think is useful to have.
Yeah, it certainly is. It also can show opportunities. Let's say you're an employer, it can show opportunities for where you can go harvest your next crop of of potential future employees, and also show areas where it could serve us to boost things up a bit and put a little more emphasis on. But just having this kind of information really has a lot of opportunities to inform decisions and funding and programs, going forward. Okay, there was something we talked about mentioning, and the news came like on a Friday, for example. So it came kind of late in the day for me. But I did have a quick opportunity to talk to Woody Foster from the Board of Life, which is literacy is for everyone, about they have, a familiar face at the helm of the organization. I didn't want to say new face because she's not new entirely, but they're very excited about the leadership direction. And so I think you mentioned wanting to chat about that, and I thought you had a post on your website too that I think I can pull up real quick.
Yes, and I don't know if you're trying to avoid pronouncing her last name, because I know I was.
Okay, you say it.
Erica Delio. And she's going to be like, get a text right now, Patrick. That's totally wrong. But Miss Erica, since we're in Cayman, is their new executive director. And she's been with Life for going on almost 2 years now, and has extensive experience in education, including at Cayman Prep and in the Montessori system, et cetera. So I know I've talked to the previous executive director, Juliette Austin, on a number of occasions, and she, like everybody else, thought this was the obvious and the best choice. So I'm hoping to sit down and have an interview with Erica soon, and maybe coming up, because I've been talking to Life for a long while about trying to match efforts and partner, and maybe partner on like a discussion panel or an event coming up. So
that'd be so cool, because there's so much information that they have, and there's a lot that they've been working on over the past couple of years, and also I'm also interested in seeing kind of what lies ahead for the organization as well. I know they've been working on sort of the strategic plan for the next few years, but this component of our education is so important from my perspective that I don't think we can possibly spend enough time on it. Although we did do not too badly on the English and the regional things, I have to say. Not too bad. And I'm going to mispronounce her name because I couldn't figure out if it was Erica Doolio. So she's going to have to come on the show and say it for us herself. Determined. All right, so I'm trying to push all the buttons, Patrick, and my glasses aren't working. We're back.
The glasses that are the problem.
Yeah, it's not my eyes or my brain. So it's all good. So on my end, I was going to share a new classroom of the month with you, but I don't have it handy. So I'm just going to have to make that a fabulous surprise for the next time that we come up, because we've been working on a couple of them in production right now, and it's been really fun for me, to get out there with the kids again and, see them rolling up their sleeves and trowels in some cases, as you will, because our classrooms aren't always the most conventional. And we have some environmental stuff coming up, which I think is quite cool, which I really have enjoyed. And then there was one I didn't share, I don't think, with you recently, but that I really did enjoy. The Cayman Islands Further Education students have a production company, and I really enjoyed watching them work. It was kind of like, wow, the next generation, I see them there.
Competitors.
Talented.
Yeah,
it's
you
okay
gotta
with me.
Push them now.
No, I'm like, come take over today. So it's good stuff. All right, anything else we want to touch on before we head off into the sunset and I go back to trying to perhaps I should have taken a horticulturalist class.
No, just I know this is late, but we missed last week, but happy Mother's Day.
Thank you. And we missed last week's because I was actually enjoying Mother's Day. I got like 12 hours of sleep. It was amazing. Never to happen again, but All good. All right, thanks, Patrick. All right, see you hopefully next week. And wait, we got to roll the beautiful bean footage.